Hi there, my name is Bernadette Smith. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I have found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data, but there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Naeema Arrastia, Chief Business Officer at Red Rabbit. This week, our conversation is about stolen Japanese artifacts going home, Malcolm X getting his due, Karat's unique approach to hiring, and more. Naeema, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. As you mentioned, I am the Chief Business Officer at Red Rabbit, and Red Rabbit is the leading Black-owned K through 12 school food management company in the country. But we're really a social justice organization, and we're uplifting kids with culturally relevant, chef-prepared meals in affirming spaces that we design. So we do a lot of work ensuring that kids feel seen and heard. My role specifically at Red Rabbit is I oversee our HR functions, our finance, and our communications. And in that capacity, I am the guardian of Red Rabbit's culture, really driving the organization's impact through my years of experience and my executive coaching certification to really ensure that our people leadership and our strategic vision is in line where we as an organization want to go.
I love that. Can you give it? I mean, it's pretty amazing that you're working not only on the culture, but also the design of the space. I mean,
Yes.
that's absolutely amazing. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like in reality? Give us a little example.
Yeah, sure. So, as we've grown our business over the last nearly 20 years, we're constantly pushing the envelope as to what else can we do for our kids. So we've turned the corner recently on really perfecting, ensuring that our menus are culturally relevant. And now we're creating what we like to call neighborhood restaurants inside of schools. So we have a professional interior designer on our team who is currently, working with a program at Columbia to further drive her experience in creating culturally relevant spaces and affirming spaces. And in that capacity, we actually work with not only the kids getting their feedback, but with neighborhood artists. And we put local art inside of schools. We'll highlight, chefs that are relevant to the community that we're serving. It's really a beautiful experience and really a manifestation of what's on the plate.
I love that. And when I hear things like school lunches and culturally relevant and local art, I immediately think nonprofits or government. But Red Rabbit's actually a for-profit company, isn't that right?
We are a for-profit organization. And it's something that, over the years, we've often been asked, why are you not a nonprofit? Are you not, is this something you don't want to go into? And our CEO is a true visionary. And one of the things that he's always held strong to was the opportunity to envision the organization how he would like to envision it. And what we found over the years is being a for-profit organization really allows us to write our own ticket. So not only does it create kind of a higher level of internal connection with the mission because people recognize this is a choice. It's not something that we have to do. Nobody's telling us to do it necessarily. It also connects us deeper with our partners externally. They fully understand who we are when we come into a room. They recognize that one of our primary missions is to uplift historically under-resourced community, primarily Black and Brown. So in that capacity, we're really living and walking our mission in that way. And, you know, I think one of the things that often gets overlooked as well is because we're a for-profit, we have to innovate, right?
Mm,
We're not going to get that dollar necessarily through a grant as much as we would like to. And God bless all those grant writers out there.
yeah.
Innovate and be creative in order to ensure that our mission is in alignment with where our bottom line needs to be. So we're constantly being creative and thinking of ways to, you know, connect with all of our data points on our P&L.
Wow. And so can you just give me a quick rundown or give us a quick rundown of some of the school districts you're in?
Right. So Red Rabbit, you know, was founded in 2005. We are headquartered in New York. We currently make a little over 30,000 meals a day. We are in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and we'll be entering DC in the fall, looking primarily to work with wards 7 and 8. For those folks that are unfamiliar with the wards in DC, those are historically under-resourced communities, and that's really where we thrive. So we have about 25, 30 kitchens across those communities, working with about a dozen or so cities along the way.
Wow. I love it. I think it's just really fun to see companies. I mean, my company's a for-profit, right? I mean, companies that are very values driven, very purpose driven, but just, you know, follow a different business model. And, you know, I'm very committed to giving back as well. So I just think that there are a lot of ways to think about it and a lot of ways that people can really find their purpose in whatever their work happens to be.
I agree.
So let's get into this week's story that I wrote about, which was how on the show last week, my 13-year-old son, he was homesick from school and he was at his other house. And then all of a sudden I got a notification on this very show that he popped in and he left a comment that said, "I completely agree. Diversity is important to hear every side of the story." And, you know, my guest and I, we laughed about it, but, you know, I was thinking about it later, and what it just meant to me is that he's watching. Like,
Yeah.
he is paying attention to what I do, what I say, how I lead, how I show up. And I personally just appreciate the reminder that I better show up right. I better lead with love because they're paying attention. And I think this not just goes for parents, but also leaders.
Mm-hmm.
People are watching us.
Most certainly, and it's kind of like that old ethical, you know, model they tell you, like, if you talk to your family or friends about it, or would you talk to your family or friends about XYZ situation openly and honestly? And if the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't do it, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of our collective desire to kind of, you know, not only talk the talk, but walk the walk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I don't know whether he's watching today. He is on spring break, but let's get into this week's
Let's do
good
it.
vibes. All right, the first story this week is about Malcolm X, who finally is getting inducted into the Nebraska Hall of Fame, getting a bust at the state capitol, and a new cultural center and museum. So, finally getting recognized by his home state for all of his amazing contributions during the civil rights movement. Better late than never.
Yeah, we're good for that narrative, right? Better late than never. Jesus, what, nearly 60 years ago that the man was assassinated, and here we are. But kudos to Nebraska for honoring him and for, you know, giving him the flowers that he ultimately deserves. You know, I actually was I'm Muslim. I was raised Muslim in a very small town where there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. And at that time, I wore the full hijab. And I remember when the movie came out all those years ago with Denzel Washington, and seeing, you know, his life played out, and his journey that he made as a human, you know, the continuum of people's level of acceptance. And as we're talking about DEI, you know, varies in his personal journey and growth towards the end of his life was really a testament to, you know, people can change over time when given the opportunity. And I think more so being exposed to the differences in all of us, but more so the commonalities. So I always think about Malcolm X as a person who most certainly had his point in his life where he was a revolutionary, and maybe some people thought he was somebody trying to tear apart the fabric of our society. I like to see him as the complete opposite of that. So
Yeah.
kudos to Nebraska.
I know. Kudos. I completely agree. I mean, and I just appreciate that this we're still seeing tributes, we're still seeing anti-racist actions, we're still seeing progress
Mm-hmm.
despite the negativity and the headlines and all the rest. So
Yeah,
good. I mean, it still is working. It's still working.
it's still working. At the end of the day, we still have the opportunity to change, for sure.
That's right. All right. The second story this week comes from France and Germany, which are both embracing the concept of a 4-day work week, but with different approaches and motivations. So in France, it's about divorced parents with shared custody who are now going to have a 4-day work week because France is promoting shared parenting and trying to improve work-life balance. But Germany is conducting a 6-month trial based off of a great experience in the UK, and that's all about productivity, talent retention, getting new talent, etc. So either way, flexible work is good for everyone.
I agree. I mean, we were probably all in this place with COVID and the idea of work from home, work from office. I mean, I'm currently in a WeWork right now. So, the idea that you are unable to have that kind of balance seems to be at this point a bit of an antiquated way of thinking, and entire countries pushing the envelope as opposed to a single entity doing it is really heartening. And I hope, quite honestly, it takes on. Who wouldn't want a 4-day work week?
I know. I mean, especially, I mean, it does often, sometimes it means that there are longer days, for
Mm-hmm.
some companies, but a lot of times it's 32 hours a week. And when folks only have 32 hours a week, they can be very productive. So the studies have gone really well in the past.
It's a heartening opportunity. And what I thought I found most interesting in the article is that they mentioned a few times that it was a socialist country. Like, does it only have to happen in a socialist country? Just best practice. I think we can kind of move away from that. It seemed like an unnecessary call out, but
I
hey.
would agree with that. All right. The third story this week is from Karat, which is a tech recruiting provider. And what they have done is very interesting to me. They are innovating their hiring practices by offering off-hour interviews and interview redos. So what they have found is that women of color in particular are 42% more likely to schedule off-hour slots. A lot of folks are also embracing interview redos, which is meaning higher job acceptance rates and ultimately a lot more diversity in their hiring. I think it's very, very cool.
It is so cool. I actually forwarded that article to our recruiter. So thank you for sharing that. She right now does do interviews early morning or on holidays. She makes herself available for folks who might be off. But the idea of the redo process is really interesting. Right now I'm live, and if I mess up, I mess up. I can't take back live. And the idea of, it's probably a similar experience for someone who's getting interviewed for something, no offense, that has a lot more impact on their life, right, than our chat together. And the ability to kind of allow somebody to go back and maybe try again might make a big difference. And it's actually something I think we're going to consider internally.
I think it does make a big difference, right? Because everyone has a bad day sometimes, and imposter syndrome is real. And I think that there are just a lot of barriers. And if we can just reduce some of the friction, we're going to see better results. And, to really, the way things have been done before is not going to work if we're still trying to, as we continue to want to increase diversity. It's just, we have to think differently.
Yeah, I know our recruiter often will do camera off or phone because she has found people get really nervous if you have to look at the person, and she's found a little bit more traction in that way as well. So I think any tip or trick to allow for that person to shine, it can only benefit you as as the employer. So
Exactly.
worthwhile exploration for sure.
Exactly. All right. The fourth story this week comes from Massachusetts, where the FBI helped return 22 stolen Japanese artifacts, including portraits and a hand-drawn map of Okinawa. They're now returned back to Japan. These are Japanese treasures, some dating back to the 1700s, that were found among a World War II veteran's belongings, with a note indicating they were stolen at the end of the war, but the family turned them in. Whew.
That was a roller coaster of a story. And then they had a footnote that he had actually never been in World War II. I was ready for the true crime after that. I was like, where's the podcast? Like, I want to learn more. Again, congrats to the family for doing what's right and, saying, hey, this isn't ours. I think the theft of cultural property is rampant. If you consider the British Museum, the Louvre. I mean, I remember reading relatively recently out in LA, the Fowler Museum just returned a bunch of stuff to Ghana. It's important, you're stealing people's history and literally cultural artifacts. So again, it's one of those, uplifting moments. And also the FBI just started this program in 2004.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Most of these stories every week fall into the category of better late than never. Otherwise, I'd have nothing to write about.
Maybe that's a whole other category, a whole other podcast you can start. Just better late than never. I found, it's making the rounds a lot. I feel that narrative of institutions being held responsible. I mean, this was a family that had these pieces.
Yeah.
The Met, the British Museum, all of these, very large profit-driven organizations that are really reaping the benefits of stolen property is something that, I think the entire world has to grapple with. I don't know how many times I've been to the Met and whatnot and ogled over a piece of artwork that may or may not have been stolen. So, I think it's a lot of things that we all have to come to grips with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, as we continue to come to grips, you can certainly bet that you can read about it in 5 things.
Nice plug.
All right. The last story this week comes from the PWHL, or the Professional Women's Hockey League, which is debuting for the very first time at the Bell Center, home of the Montreal Canadiens. So this game is on April 20th, and it's the Bell Center is the largest hockey arena in North America. Tickets sold out in under 20 minutes. So women's sports breaking all kinds of records. I love it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. When I read this one in your newsletter, I was like, oh, okay. Hockey's typically not a topic of choice. Doesn't necessarily float up in the algorithm. But when I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. The idea that, hockey is, if I recall correctly, the national pastime, or definitely a top sport in Canada, and to have a women's team sell out the largest arena, it's really just breaking down so many boundaries on so many levels. When you think about women already and pay disparity in corporate America, let alone in sports, it's even more egregious.
Yeah.
And then coming off the back of Caitlin Clark and all of her triumphant, wins here in the States. So it's a fantastic story. And I hope all the little girls and boys out there see this as an opportunity, as you too can.
That's
can
right.
Does not matter.
You just gave me goosebumps.
Aw.
Thank you. And I think that you're absolutely right, and we've celebrated a lot of really cool milestones in women's sports recently. The Kansas City, there's a new pro women's soccer team in Kansas City, which has the big new stadium, the first in the world for women. I mean, it's just been really cool to see progress and so much more investment in the sport, because it's awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on today's show, Naeema. How can folks stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can definitely follow us, at My Red Rabbit on LinkedIn and Instagram, and of course our website, www.myredrabbit.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that gets in the show notes. Is it okay if I put your LinkedIn in the show notes as well?
Sure, go right ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. And folks, this week's call to action is to check out 5 Ally Actions, Karen Catlin's weekly newsletter that's been around for 6 years now. Karen is a great friend of mine, and sometimes she sends me stories for 5 things. So I'll make sure you get the link to subscribe to 5 Everyday Actions in this week's show notes. Thank you so much for joining me this week, Naeema. You've been a really fun guest. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having, and thank you for starting my week off with some positivity. I will receive that and let it wash over me. Thank you so much.
Enjoy it. Have a great week. Thanks so much. Take care.
As well. Bye.
Bye.